My name is Evelyn Carter, and for most of my life, I believed I had everything under control. I was 34, a tech entrepreneur who had built her own company from scratch in San Francisco, living in a loft overlooking the bay. I was fiercely independent, sharp, and driven. But above all, I believed I was untouchable. I woke up that morning to the hum of the city, the sun reflecting off the water, and the smell of coffee. My boyfriend, Julian, had been with me for 4 years. He was charming, intelligent, always a few steps ahead in every conversation, and he had a way of making me feel safe. Every morning he kissed my forehead before leaving for his law firm. Every evening, we shared dinner and laughter. I had thought I knew him completely. That illusion shattered in the quietest of ways. I was in the office late, reviewing the quarterly projections for our startup. I had noticed something strange in the revenue reports, small transfers out of our account that I didn't recognize. I assumed it was an accounting error. But when I asked Julian about it casually over dinner, he laughed it off. "Eve, don't stress over numbers," he said. "Everything is fine. Trust me." It was the way he said it, too smooth, too confident, that made my stomach twist. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, but my instincts were screaming. Julian had secrets, and they weren't small. I remembered a message I had accidentally seen on his laptop weeks ago, a line of code, followed by a strange instruction: keep her in the dark. File by Friday. I had assumed it was work-related, but now, with the transfers, the coincidence seemed too sharp to ignore. I began my investigation quietly. I had access to our company's internal system as CEO. I dug through encrypted messages, emails, and transfers. What I found made me freeze. Julian had been siphoning funds from my company, sending them to an anonymous offshore account. The numbers weren't massive individually, but collectively, they were staggering: over $2 million missing in just 6 months. I didn't confront him immediately. I needed proof, something undeniable. That weekend, while he was out, I traced the transactions further and discovered a shell company registered under a name I didn't recognize: Aegis Innovations. Aegis was the recipient of all these funds. Whoever was behind it had meticulously hidden their trail. Whoever Julian was working with knew exactly how to cover their tracks. The next day, I stayed calm, masking my suspicion. Julian came home in his usual calm manner, briefcase in hand. "Everything okay?" he asked, sliding the door shut. "Fine," I said, pouring myself coffee, watching his every move. Work was busy. He didn't notice my calculated silence. He never did. I realized then that Julian wasn't just dishonest, he was dangerous. He didn't make mistakes. Whoever he was protecting, or working with, wasn't someone I could approach casually. And now, I was in their path. I called my friend Maya, a cybersecurity expert who had helped me in the past. She didn't ask questions, she just listened. "Eve, if he's moving that kind of money, you need a plan," she said. Her voice was steady but serious. "You can't confront him directly. That'll tip him off." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I didn't know who I could trust. Julian was clever, charming, and I had loved him deeply. But love doesn't stop betrayal. And mine was only beginning. 3 days later, I decided to dig deeper. Julian had left his laptop unattended, a rare mistake. I accessed it quietly, not touching anything he had written. Hidden folders revealed communications with an unknown person using the alias Mercury. The messages were encrypted, but Maya helped me crack them. The first decrypted message made my blood run cold. Target: Evelyn Carter. Timeline: 3 weeks. Ensure compliance. It wasn't just money. It wasn't just betrayal. They were talking about me. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. This wasn't an ordinary embezzlement. Julian and Mercury were plotting something against me, and I didn't know what. But I knew one thing: I couldn't wait for them to make the first move. I spent the next 48 hours setting countermeasures. I secured my personal accounts, hid sensitive company files, and began documenting every suspicious action Julian had taken. I couldn't involve the authorities yet, too many variables, too many unknowns. This had to be handled smartly, quietly, and strategically. By the end of the second day, I had built a digital fortress around myself. Every file was backed up, every transaction verified, every communication monitored. I was ready to watch, to wait, to strike when the time came. And strike I would. But Julian wasn't naive. He noticed subtle changes: my calmness, my focus, my slight distance. He started testing me, asking pointed questions, leaving hints in conversations, trying to see if I knew anything. I remained perfectly composed. Then came the first real confrontation. It was a rainy Thursday evening. Julian leaned against the kitchen counter, holding a glass of wine. "Eve, I know you've been snooping," he said softly, eyes locked on mine. I smiled faintly. "Snooping? I wouldn't call it that. Just careful management." He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Careful? Right. You've always been careful. But some things some people of you can't control." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had seen enough to know he was bluffing, testing the waters. The real storm was yet to come. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay awake, listening to the rain against the window, knowing the battle has begun. Julian had underestimated me. I was no longer the woman who blindly trusted. I was aware. I was prepared. And I would protect myself at any cost. The storm had settled outside, but inside my loft, tension throbbed like electricity in the air. Julian's subtle threats lingered in my mind, and I knew he was planning his next move. Every time he left the apartment, I felt the weight of unseen eyes on me, and every glance at my phone made my heart race. I had to act, but carefully. One wrong step and he would strike first. I called Maya again. She suggested setting up a secure monitoring system tracking all digital activity related to Julian and his communications with Mercury. We spent hours building firewalls, encryption walls, and traps. Every suspicious email, every hidden folder, every financial transaction would be logged. Julian was clever, but I was smarter. By the next morning, I had discovered something shocking. A hidden folder in Julian's laptop contained documents labeled Project Eclipse. I opened one, my hands shaking. It detailed plans to sell confidential intellectual property from my startup, my proprietary AI algorithms, to an offshore company. The kicker: my name was being used as the front. If the deal went through, I would appear complicit. My reputation, my company, my life's work all at risk. I couldn't go to the authorities yet, it would alert Julian. I needed evidence first. I had to catch him in the act. Over the next 48 hours, I executed my plan carefully. I installed hidden cameras in the office, encrypted my own communications, and began creating decoy files, false algorithms that looked real to anyone snooping. I fed them into the system, a digital trap I hoped Julian or Mercury would fall for. And then it happened. It was Friday. Julian returned home earlier than usual. He didn't greet me in the usual way. Instead, he headed straight to his laptop in the study, typing furiously. I watched from the living room, pretending to scroll through my phone. The security cameras I had set up sent real-time feeds to my encrypted tablet. I could see him transferring files. My pulse raced. This was it, the proof I needed. Suddenly, the sound of a notification made him freeze. His brow furrowed. He leaned back, checking his phone. My stomach dropped as I realized it wasn't just me watching. Mercury had messaged him. Double-check the front. Ensure compliance. Eve must appear innocent. Julian's eyes darted around, panic barely controlled. That's when I made my move. I sent a secure copy of the files to Maya, along with timestamps, IP logs, and screenshots. Within seconds, She confirmed everything had been recorded. Julian's plan would unravel in court if I needed it to. But Julian wasn't done. That evening, he approached me in the kitchen, his charming mask slipping. "Eve, why are you so distant lately?" "Something's wrong," he said, eyes piercing mine. I smiled faintly, carefully. "I've just been busy, Julian. You know how work gets." He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. And that was dangerous. He would try riskier moves now, desperate to regain control. The next day, I discovered another layer to the web. A journalist from a tech magazine had contacted my company, asking suspiciously detailed questions about my startup's funding and intellectual property. Julian had reached out to them anonymously, planting seeds of doubt about my management and accusing me of misappropriating funds. I felt fury rising. He wasn't just trying to steal my company. He was trying to destroy me publicly. My reputation, painstakingly built over years, was at stake. I couldn't let that happen. I called Maya and my lawyer, Connor, immediately. We devised a two-pronged plan. Defend publicly and legally issue statements to the journalist, backed by evidence. Show Julian's manipulation without revealing my traps. Strike secretly gather undeniable proof linking Julian to Project Eclipse and Mercury, so that in court, I could counter his lies with airtight documentation. Over the next week, I executed both plans. I fed the journalist precise, verifiable data, exposing the inconsistencies in Julian's anonymous accusations. At the same time, I continued monitoring Julian, who became increasingly erratic. He was sloppy now, overconfidence turning to panic. One evening, I received a cryptic email from Mercury himself. The subject line read, "You can't stop what's coming." The message contained nothing else, just a single image of my apartment's exterior. My blood ran cold. They had been watching me. I immediately upgraded my security. Cameras, motion sensors, encrypted communications, and even dummy devices to mislead anyone surveilling me. I wasn't just defending my company anymore, I was protecting my life. Days later, Julian made his boldest move yet. He attempted to transfer the decoy files I had planted to an offshore account. But thanks to Maya's monitoring system, we traced the transfer, recorded IP addresses, and captured proof of his intentions. Julian didn't know I had anticipated him. That night, he confronted me directly. He cornered me in the loft, his face shadowed by the dim light. "Eve, I don't understand. Why are you one step ahead of me at every turn?" I stepped back, my voice calm, controlled, deadly. "Because I know who you really are, Julian. And I'm not afraid of you." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The confident, untouchable Julian I had loved was cracking. And I wasn't done. "I know about Project Eclipse," I continued. "I know about Mercury. Every move you've made, every message, every transfer, I have it all. One wrong move and the authorities see everything. Your career, your freedom, gone." He laughed nervously. "Do you think this is over?" I smiled faintly, coldly. "No, it's just beginning for you." The next few days were a tense standoff. Julian avoided me, his arrogance replaced with paranoia. He tried subtle manipulations, leaving notes, staged conversations, hoping I would slip up. But I didn't. I was untouchable now, shielded by evidence, technology, and unwavering resolve. Finally, the breaking point came. Julian tried one last desperate gambit, a legal threat, claiming I had fabricated the entire story of Project Eclipse to frame him. But this time, I was ready. Maya, Connor, and I compiled every shred of proof: encrypted emails, transaction records, logs, timestamps, and even Julian's own confessions captured in messages and files. We were going to turn the tables completely. The morning was unnervingly quiet. The city outside my loft moved with its usual rhythm, oblivious to the storm brewing inside my life. Julian had retreated into silence after his failed attempt to manipulate me, but I knew he was planning something sprayed men always are. I didn't wait. With Maya and Connor, we reviewed every piece of evidence we had collected over the past weeks: encrypted messages, transaction records, security footage, timestamped logs, and even Julian's own notes detailing Project Eclipse. Every single piece painted a damning picture. The decoy files I had planted, the traces of Mercury's communication, everything was airtight. If this went to court or worse, to law enforcement, it would destroy him. And now it was time. It was Thursday afternoon when the first public move came. A tech magazine published an article about recent attempted intellectual property theft in San Francisco startups, but this time, they named no one. The article detailed sophisticated cyber and financial manipulation. I had fed the journalist a carefully curated version, enough to expose Julian's methods without implicating myself. The piece went viral in the local tech community. Investors and colleagues reached out, confused and concerned. Julian's name was whispered in the corridors, never attached directly, but the implication was clear. By Friday, Julian's panic was evident. He confronted me in the loft, his face pale, hands shaking slightly as he carried a stack of documents. "Evelyn, please," he said, voice tight. "We can settle this quietly. I can explain everything." I let the silence stretch, my eyes steady, my voice calm but cutting. "Explain what, Julian?" "That you tried to steal my company, launder funds, and ruin my life?" He faltered, his confidence finally cracking. "It's not like that." I cut him off. "It's exactly like that. And I have proof. Every step you took, every communication, every transaction, it's all documented." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand the consequences if this goes public. The law, it's on my side." I smiled faintly. "No, Julian. You left the law out of this when you tried to cover it up. You were careful, too careful. But I was smarter. By Monday, we filed the lawsuit. I accused Julian and Mercury of corporate espionage, attempted embezzlement, and defamation. The evidence was overwhelming: the decoy files, the logs, the messages, the transfers all pointed to their guilt. Mercury, as we discovered, was an international player with multiple aliases, but the digital footprints traced back to Julian's coordination. The courtroom was packed. Julian entered with his usual polished suit, trying to mask fear behind charm. I walked in calmly, dressed in navy, shoulders squared, eyes sharp. Maya and Connor flanked me, exuding quiet confidence. The judge reviewed the preliminary evidence and allowed the case to proceed immediately. Julian's lawyers were scrambling. Mercury, unsurprisingly, did not appear. Every time Julian opened his mouth, my evidence cut him down: messages, logs, and files proving he was behind every move. By the third day, it was over. The court dismissed his attempts to claim I had fabricated the story. Julian was held personally liable for attempted embezzlement and ordered to pay restitution. Any claims he had made against me were thrown out, and I retained full control over my company and intellectual property. Mercury remained at large, but without Julian as his front, his influence was neutralized. After the courtroom, Julian tried one last time to speak to me in the hallway. His voice was low, desperate. "Eve, you didn't have to ruin me completely. I misjudged you." I looked him in the eye, cold and resolute. "No, Julian. You didn't misjudge me. You misjudged yourself. I was never someone you could control. And now, you never will be." I walked away, the weight of weeks of fear, anger, and tension lifting with every step. For the first time, I felt true clarity. The weeks that followed were quiet but purposeful. I returned to my company fully, taking control of every aspect of the operations. Investors who had once doubted my judgment now approached with confidence, impressed by the way I had handled the crisis. My reputation, instead of being tarnished, had grown stronger. People respected the woman who had faced betrayal, manipulation, and danger and had emerged victorious. Maya stayed close, helping me tighten security and plan future contingencies. Connor became a trusted ally for legal matters. And me? I learned something I had always believed but had never fully internalized until now: trust is earned, not given. Power is not just in what you control externally, but in understanding your own worth and refusing to be undermined. Sometimes, victory isn't loud. It isn't about revenge or celebration. It's quiet. It's the absence of fear, the restoration of peace, the reclamation of your life. I still walk through the city streets, past the towers of glass and steel, but now I do so with confidence. I am Evelyn Carter. I survived betrayal, manipulation, and danger. I protected my company, my reputation, and my life. And in the process, I became stronger than I ever imagined. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: never hand over your power blindly, never underestimate your instincts, and never let someone else define your limits. Strength isn't about fighting every battle, sometimes it's about surviving long enough to strike with precision and reclaim what's yours. And if you are listening, remember, the storm is temporary, but the peace that follows is eternal.